culvert that was, blocked or collapsed or
Started. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting and public hearing for Monday, April 24th, 2017. And I'd ask that you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batkins?
Here.
Mr. Batanti? Here. Mr. Servil?
Here.
Mr. Tominello?
Here.
Mr. York?
Here.
Mr. Witt? Here. Mr. Burkowski?
Here. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of April 10, 2017, and approval of the bills in the amount of $847,561.20.
Make a motion to approve the bills. Support.
Got a motion by Mr. York, with support by Mr. Tominello. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next is our approval of the regular agenda. Board members, there are a few additional items that we'd like to add to the agenda. One is a request from the clerk's office for some additional funding for our audit, and I would propose that be item F7. Another is an update from or basically a request from the township attorney regarding representation in a lawsuit. I would propose that as item F8. And then finally, I need to update the board and have a little discussion about the 2 trees that fell that we talked about in the past. So I'm going to propose that as item F9. Otherwise, if there's no other changes to the agenda, I'd be looking for a motion to approve as amended.
So moved. Support.
All right, we've got a motion from Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. Servil. Discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Next, announcements. We are currently accepting applications for employment for a temporary full-time clerical position, a part-time parks and ground maintenance worker, a part-time mechanical inspector, and a part-time summer ground maintenance worker. So the parks and ground maintenance worker would be a year-round part-time position. It's typically filled oftentimes by retired gentlemen in the township, although anyone can apply. And the part-time summer ground maintenance would be a perfect job for perhaps someone home from college, looking for maybe a little stronger back to help out with maintaining some of the gardens, or for someone who may have some gardening experience. If you're interested in any of these positions, you can submit an application to the supervisor's office. There's links on the township website, harrison-township.org, under our resources tab. Macomb County is hosting the Spring 2017 Tree, Shrub, and Plant Sale this Saturday and Sunday at Freedom Hill. This sale provides an opportunity for the public to purchase young trees, shrubs, wildflower seed, fruit trees, and other plants at the most reasonable prices you can find. You can learn more at green.macombgov.org. Once again, the Let's Move Festival of Races will be running through Harrison Township. This year, it's this Saturday, April 29th. To accommodate the race, eastbound South River Road and southbound Jefferson will be closed from approximately 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. There are detours and alternate routes for each position, for each closure. And if information for that, there's a link on the website and also at letsmovefestivalofraces.com. The township's waterfront park is now open for the season. It's been already pretty heavily utilized. If anyone might be interested in renting or reserving the pavilion at Waterfront Park, please contact the supervisor's office, 586-466-1445. Our library has many events on their calendar, a lot of good things going on. Make sure you check out their website, htlibrary.org. Also, Saturday, May 13th, is the Run Like a Mother 5K. It starts at 10 a.m. and that's beginning beginning and ending at the Senior Activity Center at Tucker Park on Ballard and Jefferson. You can find out more information about that 5K at runmichigan.com. And of course, for information on all of these or any other events, you can stop in the supervisor's office, visit the website, and follow us on Twitter at Harrison TWPMI. Are there any other announcements?
Just one, Mr. Supervisor. Just a reminder, and there's more information coming. June 10th is Harrison Township's Park and Rec Fishing Derby. It'll be held at Metro Parkways or Metro Beach. We'll be getting some more information out on that. And I believe we have a shred day coming up, May 12th at 12:30. They'll have a shred day here. So any documents you need shredded.
I think first 2 boxes are free.
The first 2 boxes are free, so. That's it.
Good.
Mr. Supervisor, if anybody's been using the park over at Tucker Park, I know T-ball's over, they have T-ball over there. We had an issue, they lost electrical service to the building, but we're working on restoring that, and the bathrooms will still be open. I know we've had a lot of call from T-ball folks, so that way we don't have kids sneaking behind the bushes, so.
We're working on it.
Mr. Supervisor?
Yep.
There's people standing and there's still places open if they'd give them a minute to find a seat.
Yeah, there's some seats up front and interspersed if anyone's willing to scoot down or make some room or,
We need ushers today.
yeah. There are some seats up front. Okay, next on
You
our.
might want to explain the on-deck chairs too.
Yep, I was gonna do that, thanks. Next on our agenda would be items B, 1, 2, and 3. I think at least a majority of the faces I see here, I believe, are here for the Beechwood Storm Sewer Pump Station and Tributary Storm Drain Special Assessment District. So the process that we'll follow here is we will begin cover this agenda. We're gonna have a discussion about the Special Assessment District. Once we open the public hearing, we do have 2 chairs up front that are on-deck chairs, so if you, just in the interest of keeping moving, if you wish to address the board or ask questions or whatnot, if you feel free to come forward, have a seat in the chair so that when the last speaker is done, you can step right up to the podium and we'll keep it moving. I think I'd like to try something a little bit different tonight. I suspect that some of the questions that people might have are the same questions for multiple residents. So in the interest of possibly answering that question, we typically open a public hearing, allow for questions, close the public hearing, and give responses. But if the board doesn't have a problem with it, I'd like to be able to try to respond after each question, because that may answer or help guide the next question that the next resident might have, so.
You looking for a motion?
I don't think it's necessary. I mean, I think we're allowed to speak during the public hearing, but normally we don't follow that format, but I think that might be helpful to keep things going.
I'm okay with that format.
Yep. And we do have a presentation that may answer some of the questions or help whoever's present here with questions, have a more informed question based on the information presented, so. Mr. Witt?
When I think we'll walk through some information from a more technical standpoint from our township engineer, go through some of the scope of the project, and then I'll talk about the special assessment process and sort of what that entails, so cover that portion of it. So I guess at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Newmer.
Thank you, board members, members of the audience. Can you hear me okay? Okay, good. We're going to go through a brief presentation here. Purpose of this presentation is to familiarize the audience and the board with the area that we're talking about that's going to be covered by the special assessment, which properties are included and why. We're going to review the need for the project, why we're doing this project in the first place, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what we're proposing to do out there. And then, as Mr. Witt said, he'll be addressing the special assessment process, and I believe the supervisor will be able to speak to the costs and some of those things too. So we'll get started with this. Okay, a brief history of drains. In general, this is the area that we're speaking of. It's kind of the middle section of the township. The area pretty much between South River Road, Metro Parkway, Jefferson, and I-94 is kind of a general area. There's been a lot of changes in the drains and the drainage patterns in this area over the past few decades. So I kind of wanted to step through those because I think there's probably some questions as to why, I'm not close to that. The pump station is located down off of Metro Parkway and North Point Parkway. And, your property might not be anywhere near that, so you're wondering why are you included in the special assessment district? So we'd like to address some of those things. Okay, first of all, there are 3 different drainage areas that feed into that pump station today, but that's not how it always was. This first drainage area is called the Pettit Conlet Drain Area, and these are defined by the actual topography of the site. So as the water, as the rain hits your property, which way it drains, when it hits the ditch in front of your home, which way it flows, when it gets into a culvert, where it ends up. So that's how these drainage areas are determined. And these drainage areas are determined by Macomb County Public Works. So the first drain area we have is called the Pettit Conlet Drain. And it's the area basically around Ashland, a little bit north, up to just shy of South River Road. There is a natural drainage course, a drainage way that goes through there. And all of that water at one time anyway, flowed east and then north up into the river. So that was a free flow drainage area that discharged into the Clinton River. The next area here is the Savan Drain. This is just to the south of the Pettit Conlet. This is a longer, kind of narrow drainage area. This is an area that drains into the Savan Creek, or the Savan Drain. Originally, this flowed down east over to the Savan Pump Station that was located at Metro Parkway. That pump station then picked up the water, pumped it across Metro Parkway to the south, and then where it ran down a ditch, and then ultimately discharged out into Lake St. Clair. The third drainage area is called the Vanter de Buff. This is the area that does include the current day pump station. But initially, before the pump station was constructed, this area actually all drained out by gravity. So there was a drain there, just like the Pettit Conlet. So this gravity drained down along the ditch, came out, went underneath Metro Parkway through a large box culvert, made its way down to Jefferson and Siesta, that intersection there, where it goes down the canal and then out into Lake St. Clair. I believe it was in the late 70s, the Beechwood Pump Station was constructed. Now, one of the primary reasons that the pump station was constructed is there was concern about raising lake levels. And with having a free flow drain, the water was free to drain out from the properties out toward the lake. But as the lake level increased, the water could also then back up the drain and was threatening properties. So what they did was they constructed the Beechwood Pump Station, the detention pond, and there's a small dam that goes with this, and I'll have a picture of the dam later on in the presentation so you can see it. But there's a dam located just on the north side of Metro Parkway, right at the end of the pond there, and that dam has stop logs in it that get put in order to keep the water from backing up from the lake when the lake levels get high. When they put that dam in there, it blocked up the free flow water of the channel that was previous. So they had to construct a pump station in order to take the water, lift it up over the dam, and then let it free flow out to Lake St. Clair. So that's when the pump station and the detention pond were constructed. The detention pond is there. It serves as a reservoir for the pump station so that the water can collect there, and then the pump station can pump it out efficiently. Pumps work best when you're able to turn them on and let them run. They don't work good if they turn on and off, and if they don't have a good volume of water to draw from. You think of it as taking a straw and sucking water out of a glass. When you get down toward the bottom of it, it doesn't work so well because there's not enough volume to drink from. Same thing happens with a pump. All right, so that we had that configuration that worked well for a while. Sometime, 2000s, early 2000s, Corps of Engineers came in and constructed a pump station. It's called the Siesta Pump Station. It's located down at Jefferson and Siesta, right across from where Jimmy's Liver used to be. This pump station is a large pump station. It's sized to provide drainage for this whole area. And it also has the ability to put stop logs in it to create a dam to protect against water backing in from the lake. And since we now have essentially 2 pump stations that have that same capability right now, today. And that's going to become important when we talk about the design of the pump station, because we've been able to take advantage of the fact that the downstream pump station is able to protect the township against the lake backing up into the township. Okay, in the mid-'80s, I believe it was, there was a project that was called the Harrison Relief Drain. And this project involved construction of a large underground concrete pipe that runs primarily underneath North Point Parkway, down to Coal Ridge, heads east, and then it runs down an easement area and comes down into the pond located at the pump station, at the Beechwood Pump Station. The purpose of this project was several-fold. One was the area around that drainage improvement was starting to develop, and the drains that were there couldn't handle the water that was being directed to them from the development. So they constructed this large pipe, and at the same time they decommissioned the Savan Pump Station. So those are the 2 things that happened during that project. The purpose of this pipe was to be able to collect water from these other drainage areas and redirect it down to the Beechwood Pump Station. So we'll take a look at that here. What's shown here, the outline in black, is the drainage area that's the drainage area now that's tributary to what we're calling the Harrison Relief Drain, and that includes this portion of the Petticonlet that's shown in yellow at the top. You can see that the eastern portion of the Petticonlet from I believe that's Cloverleaf. From Cloverleaf to the east, that continues to drain east and then north up to the river. The area west of Cloverleaf, when the Harrison Relief Drain was constructed, that area was redirected and regraded, and the township actually finished a project 5-6 years ago where that drain was cleaned out and redirected, so that water then was redirected back flowing west over to the Harrison Relief Drain, and then it goes south along the drain down ultimately to the Beechwood Pump Station. When the Harrison Relief Drain was constructed, there were changes in the Savan Drainage District as well. All of the drainage coming from the west that comes to the Harrison Relief Drain was intercepted by the new pipe and directed south. The area to the east, which originally went down to the pump station, that pump station was decommissioned and that water was redirected to the west so that it goes to the Harrison Relief Drain and then south down to the Beechwood Pump Station. And then with the Vanter DeBuff drainage area, that really didn't change a whole lot when the Harrison Relief Drain came in, other than the fact that now this pond that's there that used to take water from the Vanter DeBuff drain only, which is about 315 acres, give or take, now accepts drainage from the whole Harrison Relief Drain area, which is just a little bit under 900 acres. So it's almost a 300% increase in the drainage area that's tributary to the pump station. So if we take a look and put it all together here, this shows the 3 separate drainage areas as they drain into the Harrison Relief Drain in the middle, shown in red. And then that water is directed south down to the Beechwood Pump Station. It goes into the pond that's there. The relief drain actually acts as a storage unit as well. So there's an underground pipe there. That pipe fills up and holds water during large storm events. And the Beechwood Pump Station, when it pumps down, it dewaters not only the pond that's adjacent to the pump station, it also then dewaters all the water that's stored in that large diameter pipe all the way back up from here, all the way back up to the Petticonlet. The water that's in there gets pumped out as well. So that's kind of, and I know I went over that pretty quickly, but that's kind of a brief history of how the drains originally functioned and then the changes that have happened to them over the years that have changed the drainage patterns in this portion of the township. I'd like to go on real quick and talk about the need for the project and what we've got today. The existing conditions at Beechwood Pump Station, like I said, originally the pump station was designed to serve about a 315-acre site. It currently serves almost 900 acres, 300% increase. The current station has 2 pump stations that are capable of pumping 12 CFS, that's cubic feet per second. That's a volume of water or flow rate of water. That's typical. Currently, we only have one of those pumps that's operational. The other one is burned out. The township has provided portable pumps that are there that are helping to supplement the existing pump that's there. Those pumps that are there, those portable pumps, have to be refueled several times a day during a heavy rainstorm. Those of you who live down close to the pond have probably seen the township coming out, and they pay pretty close attention to the weather forecast. If they see that there's a storm coming, they go out 3-4 days ahead of time, make sure that pond is pumped down as much as they can, because we need all the storage volume in that pond that we can get. And the reason is because we're not able to take the water out of that pond and get it to the south side of Metro Parkway fast enough with the existing pumps that we have there today. That pump station has essentially failed. Like I said, it's only operating on one pump out of two. The one pump that's operating there is not operating at top efficiency, and then it's being supplemented by several township pumps. And I've got some photos of those here. So this is a picture of the pump station. You can see the pump station in the lower left-hand corner there. It's the blue control cabinet. That's part of the pump station. In the center of the photo here, you can see that's a portable gas pump that the township has brought out to the site. And they've also set up the aluminum piping that takes the water then and pushes it over top of the dam that's there. This is another view of that same pump station. You can see the pump station equipment here in the foreground, and then the piping going off into the background of the photo there. This is a photo in summertime. It shows the piping a little better. It's a little easier to see. The township's got those set up on those kind of stands like that, so that once the water gets up into there, it can drain down and out over the dam. Here's a picture of the secondary pump. There's another pump that's out there that we've been working with. This is a picture of the dam structure I mentioned at the Beechwood. This is existing at Beechwood now. So that this controls the elevation so that the water doesn't back up from the lake. And then you can see the three pipes that the township has here. They're sticking out over top of the dam. And when those pumps are running, they're discharging the water out over onto the high side of the dam. Proposed improvements, what we're planning on doing with this project. We've redesigned the pump station. The pump station has now been designed to serve the whole 893 acres that are tributary to the pump station. We're somewhat limited in how fast we can take the water out of the Beechwood Pond and push it to the south side of Metro Parkway because we have the Siesta pump station that's downstream of us. There's a couple different operating scenarios that pump station can be in. As it is today, the lake level is not high, it's low. So we're able to take out the stop logs and the water can free flow past that pump station. So today the pump station at Siesta and Jefferson is not pushing water. That water can free flow out. So when the lake level is low, we can push as much water as that channel will handle pretty much. So we can push almost as much as we want. But we did look at a design scenario where the lake level comes up. When the lake level comes up, we have to install those dams at the Siesta pump station. And when that happens, then we're limited by how much water that pump station can push from one side of the dam to the other. And that amount happens to be 44 cubic feet per second. So, as I mentioned earlier, the existing Beechwood pump station is designed for 12. The downstream one can do 44. So you can see that there's a large discrepancy there in what we're able to push versus what we could push downstream. The new system that we're constructing is going to work in a couple of different ways. First of all, we've got two pumps that we're building there now that are going to have a total capacity of 20 cubic feet per second that are used when the rain event starts. And you might say, well, gee, Dave, you just told me that we can put 44 over the dam. Why are we only putting 20? These pumps were sized in order to do the first portion of the storm. As the storm starts to build and the water starts to accumulate and flow down into the pond and into the Harrison relief drain, those pumps come on and they start pumping the water over the dam. Since the Beechwood pump station is no longer required to provide protection to the township from the lake level rising, we don't have to worry about the water coming backwards on us. We were able to lower the dam elevation. And by doing that, when we get through a large storm, there will become a certain point in time when the water in the pond will rise up. It will get up to the elevation of the new dam that we're gonna construct there, and it will be able to free flow over top of the dam. When that happens, we'll be able to push up to 75 cubic feet per second, depending on the depth of the water over the dam and how much we're getting flowing into the system at that time. It kind of varies and changes over time depending on the intensity. But that free flow dam is able to push up to 75 cubic feet per second from the Beechwood Pond area to the other side of Metro Parkway. And then it flows down, like I said, to the Siesta Pump Station. As the storm starts to subside and the water level decreases down to where it's no longer free flowing over the dam, then the new pump station will come back on, and those pumps will then take and dewater the pond, bring it down to its normal level, and it will also drain the water that's being stored within the Harrison relief drain. So then we'll be set up and ready for the next rain event. The design that we've used, we've looked at several different storm intensities, several different sizes, and we've looked at a system that is set up that it will be able to dewater the pond and dewater the storage pipes within a 24-hour period. So that if we have a rain event, at the end of the rain event, within 24 hours, we should be able to have that pumped down and ready for the next rain event again. I will say that, as with all public works projects that we design them for certain rain intensities and certain storm sizes. There will always come along a storm that's bigger than what we have it designed for. We saw one of those storms 2 years ago in August that caused major flooding all over the metro area. So this is not designed to protect against that level of storm event. Because if it was, we'd be talking about a lot more money, and there would be a lot more people in here looking at large assessment amounts. So what we tried to do is we tried to balance the design of it in order to provide a reasonable protection from flooding for the residents, also at what can be considered a reasonable cost. Now, I know that one person's definition of reasonable cost and another person's definition may be different. We understand that, but we are designing something that is in line with the practice in the industry. This is a common design standard that's used for public works type projects like this throughout Michigan. So this is a level of flood protection that we think is adequate and appropriate for the township. And then that equates then to a certain construction cost, and that cost then is equating to a certain amount of special assessment that we're going to be talking about next. So I've gone through a lot of history and a lot of kind of technical details of the existing station and the future pump station in a relatively short period of time. I'm sure that there may be some questions on that, but Mr. Supervisor and Mr. Clerk, at this time, you want to continue with the assessment policy, or do you want to go to questions?
Why don't we go through the cost,
The
and then,
cost.
yeah, and
Yep.
then we'll go through the.
Yep, so if you
Okay.
could pull up that slide that I gave you. So at least that presentation from Mr. Newmer gives I'm sure there's certainly questions just associated with that, but try to give some explanation of the pump station, where it's located, what it does, how it functions, and why it's necessary. I know he mentioned it was originally built in the 70s. I know that it was also rebuilt or upgraded at some point in the early 80s. I remember reading that there was a certain scope of work done, but regardless, that the history is really not the reason we're here today. The pump station is massively undersized.
I think my technology's failing me here. Hang on a sec. I'll try again. Well, it's a nice picture of a building, but that's not what I want to show you.
What we're gonna do is we will open the floor for public comment, and we'll allow for questions and comments and try to give those answers shortly. But we wanted to make sure we went through the presentation first, because that may answer some of the questions. Me neither. Yep.
I apologize, I don't know why this is not coming up. Let me, see if I can figure out a way to make that happen.
Dave, try and drag the document to the right. I might have set it up as a second screen. Maybe. There you go.
Hey, look at that. You were right, sir.
Okay, so this is kind of a breakdown or cost analysis. I know I had some copies in the back, so some of you may have gotten a copy of this. The total scope of the project, certainly a large portion of the cost is the pump station itself, the majority of the cost. However, we recognize that these primary drains have been, well, ignored might be a strong word, but certainly under-maintained for quite some time. And because of that, there are key points throughout our drain system that limit the flow of stormwater that might be at your road, in your backyard, wherever that might be, to ultimately get to this pump station quickly. So no small part of total functioning drain system isn't just the pump station, but it's also the drains that feed that. So this cost analysis is all inclusive of what we're trying to do in the form of the work to improve the drainage throughout the township. So the first line item, design and engineering, roughly $87,000. This is to design this as well as to do a hydrologic study of the whole 900-acre area. In-system storage kind of defines all the areas throughout the whole system, not unlike the arteries in your own body that hold the stormwater. The pump station was competitively bid, the low bid for the pump station, and some additional work that some might consider to be not related to the pump station, which we'll touch on in a minute, $708,294. When we do a special assessment, there are, for lack of a better word, penalties if we propose a scope of work and a price and we exceed that price. Clearly, there's no penalty if we say everyone's cost will be $250 and it comes at $210. But if we give you a number of $250 and it turns out to be $300, there's some inherent penalties built into the township because clearly the system is designed to give you the worst case scenario. So included in our cost analysis is a 10% contingency. So we're saying the pump station's $708,000, but we're including another almost $71,000 in our cost analysis in the event that there's something that was unforeseen in the scope of the work. We've also included drain cleanout work, and we've estimated that scope or that amount of work to be $65,000 of drain cleanouts. And in addition, woody debris removal, because in many cases, some of the reasons that some of the drains just don't move is they're full of woody debris. We've included $50,000 in this cost analysis. So that puts us at, for the total scope of work of this project, just short of $1 million, $981,000. The next step is, as we've learned from folks that have called or come in with questions about this, well, why didn't you get grants, or why didn't you do this, or why don't you look at another source? So one of the funding sources is the Glenmar Place South subdivision. Back in 2003, to give you an idea of how long we've known this pump station is undersized, in exchange for approval of the project and the permission to direct storm flow into this, the developer of that project was required to make a payment of $118,000, which is on deposit with the township, for the upgrade of the pump station. We applied for and were successful in receiving a SAW grant from the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. SAW is an acronym for Stormwater, Asset Management, and Wastewater. But the long and short of it is the state legislators said, well, in order to encourage local units of government to improve their sanitary sewer systems and their stormwater sewer systems, we're going to give out grants to help pay for the engineering. And the way the grant worked is the state paid for 90% of the first $1,111,111. I don't know why they chose that number, but that was the way it worked. So if you spent that amount of money, exactly, the state would pay for 90%, the township had to kick in 10%. We applied for and received that grant. Now, the total scope of work is limited to engineering, not construction. So the idea behind the state's grant was to convince the locals to do the engineering, and they said if you do the engineering and you don't actually do the project, you don't get the grant. We don't want to pay for plans to sit on the shelf and enrich engineers. Don't apply for this grant unless you intend to move forward with the actual construction. So $74,800 roughly was the amount that came from the state. Now, I have a composite figure because our total scope of that grant, because of other work that was done, we did a sanitary pump station, and we're doing a large asset management project, which is unrelated to this, both projects. After $1,111,111, any amount after that is a $75.25. So when we look at roughly a $1.6 million grant, it's hard to say which project fell in the 10% match and which fell in the 25% match. So instead, what we're saying is the grant we received was a total of $1.599 million. When we look at the amount we're contributing, any dollar we're spending is roughly at about an 85 to 15%. So the state gave us $74,800. The township has put in a little bit short of $13,000 toward the engineering. The next line, township contribution from general fund. I've proposed here, it's ultimately a topic of discussion amongst the board members, but we have talked about it at previous meetings. A portion of the work that's included in this project are improvements to the south side of Metro Parkway. So as Mr. Newmer described, this drain generally runs down between the Beechwood Apartments and the Maple Forest condominiums. There's a drain there, it ultimately ends up in that large pond, gets pumped. He didn't talk about maybe a couple other scopes. There's the way that the water is picked up out of that pond. Currently, we're not completely dewatering that pond. So we're changing how we're intaking the water so we have more storage capacity. There's some other things. But a key part of this is on top of building a new weir, on the south side of Metro Parkway, the storm water flows underneath Metro Parkway in a large box culvert, and it flows underneath the bridge that you see along the bike path. So if even if you're driving by, you kind of see the bridge that sits right on that drain. Part of the scope of work is to extend that box culvert, which will eliminate the bridge and replace that area with just dirt and an asphalt path. So if the box culvert is extended in that area, there's no longer a need for the bridge. In the end, it's better, I suppose, in some ways. It's a cheaper solution. Our insurance carrier has expressed to us that that bridge is kind of a source of liability because you've got a lot of rollerbladers, people biking on that, and it's kind of an uneven surface. During the winter months, we can't plow that. But regardless, that box culvert will be extended, and we're going to put a bike path over it. Some board members have said, and I can certainly see the point, that scope of work, replacing that bike path, really isn't particular to this drainage district. In other words, it's kind of a township-wide portion of the project. So we'll likely have a discussion on how much, if any, we take from the general fund to put toward that, but I put in for a financial analysis an estimate of $70,000. That's ultimately a board decision. I think it's one we'll end up discussing tonight. That would come from the general fund. We've reached out to the Department of Roads because a portion of this drainage system certainly is rainwater that hits streets and runs off. We investigated whether or not we have the authority to force the Department of Roads to contribute to this. We do not, so we can't assess the Department of Roads. The county can. They're not required to, but if the county did this project, they could assess it, but they wouldn't have qualified for the SAW grant. We applied for that SAW grant. And further, they have no history of ever assessing the Department of Roads in Macomb County for drainage projects. So the Department of Roads indicated that they would not assess, the Public Works Office indicated they would not assess the Department of Roads. However, through a conversation, we reached out to the Department of Roads, the Public Works Director, Candace Miller, did that, and we proposed that they might contribute $60,000 voluntarily, if you will, to the project. And we're waiting on an answer there. I also put in a placekeeper. I know that we made a request to the school district also to request voluntary participation. We've already earmarked $10,000 as soon as the new Public Works Commissioner came in, Candace Miller. She began to truly respond. We've had more communications and cooperation with the Public Works Office in the last, well, since January 1st than I can remember in my 8 years or 9 years here. So that's positive. They've begun to do some work in the drains, but in some cases, they said, well, we're gonna hire a contractor. So they said, well, we'll send our work crews out there. Would you be willing to pay for this portion of the work as we go? So far, this board has earmarked $10,000 toward that. And if we take an estimate of the work that they've done and are doing ongoing, I've got that figure of about $50,000. Again, Public Works doesn't have the requirement to fund this, but they're saying we'll assist with the process of cleaning out the drains. So if we take a look at those numbers, and some of those are estimates, we've got a reasonable estimated amount of $566,000. Now, if everything goes the best possible way, everyone contributes, we don't need the contingency money, that number could be below $500,000. On the flip side, if we use up all the contingency and neither the schools nor the road department decides to contribute, that number could be as high as 646 based on this latest analysis. So there is a variation. So the notice that we send is, for lack of a better word, sort of artificially high to try to say this is worst case scenario. So that kind of gives you an idea of the costs. I know that there were, we've had a lot of folks stop in with various questions, and instead of trying to guess all of them, I think it's best to just open up the floor. And as I said, as the questions come along between the engineer, our Public Works Director, and the board, we'll do our best to answer those. So I don't know if now would be an appropriate time to open the floor.
Well, I'll just walk through the
that's
special
right.
assessment process real quick. The special assessment process is the funding mechanism that the state legislature has created for public work projects to be assessed against an area that's benefited by it, where there might not be, a revenue source otherwise. And part of the reason it's designed is it affects the homeowners that benefit. You're not paying for somebody else's road or somebody else's improvement. You're only paying for what impacts you. So the board has started that process by declaring this a district and declaring that the project is a necessity. Tonight,
And calling for this public hearing.
and calling for this public hearing. We had called for the public hearing tonight. We sent out letters to everyone notifying of the date of the public hearing. We also put 2 notices out in the paper. We had a slight typo on the original notice went out, so we made sure we sent postcards out to add a little clarity to everyone. Just because it sort of looked like it might have been 5 times the amount in the letter. We clarified that. That's the total amount there, just so we didn't get people. That was one of the big questions we got, so we wanted to make sure we got that information out to people. Tonight, the purpose is to come forward and speak for or against the project. By speaking tonight, you're reserving your right to appeal the assessment later. So if you're on the fence or in between, or you think you should talk, or you think you might talk, again, if that's your purpose, is to say I want to protest it later, please make sure you get up. This is your opportunity. This is your chance. We did receive several letters by the close of business today. If you did give me those, we record those in the minutes, so that's recorded in here with your position on the project. So you don't have to get up again if you're in the audience and you gave me a letter, but you're still welcome to. After tonight, should the board choose to move forward with the project, we'll close the public hearing. We'll direct my office to create an assessment roll, which will have more finalized numbers for what the cost will be against each property. The costs for this project are broken down on a per acreage basis. That's common in drainage projects because the amount of water that falls on your property is what directly contributes to the drainage district. So somebody that has a larger lot will off-put more water than somebody on a smaller lot. So that's how we got to that figure. At that meeting, again, we'll send out notices to everyone. We run notices in the paper twice to let people know that they have the right to come to the meeting. The purpose is to speak to the assessment role at that point, not necessarily whether you're for or against the project at that point, but maybe we made a miscalculation on acreage of your property. Maybe you sold off 10 feet to your neighbor or something like that, and we don't have it reflected because we haven't got anything over from the Register of Deeds or something like that, so that's that opportunity is to correct that role. So tonight, we open the public hearing, again, as I think the supervisor said earlier, we have on-deck chairs. We ask that you use them just so we have clarity on who's coming up. Once we open the public hearing, we normally allow for, try and limit the comments to about 3 minutes. When you do speak, I'd ask, just so I can record your name and address correctly in the minutes, so we don't have a problem down the road, please say your name first and last, as well as your address. Even if I don't get it while I'm writing up here, we have the video going, we'll have that later to make sure that we get everything correct in the minutes, so.
And just a couple points to add, when you mentioned that the ultimate, at the end of this project, we talked about a per acre, so that's literally a calculation for every parcel. It isn't, there aren't slots or steps to that, so if you have 0.3 acres and your neighbor has 0.6 acres, they're paying literally twice as much as you are, and so forth.
Yeah.
Within condominium associations, you take the total acreage, and that's divided out, so I know the.
Maple Forest had X amount of units, we divided their acreage by the total number of units.
Right.
And then just to add further out as the assessment process goes, assuming everything moves forward, once the project's completed, we'll send out invoices to everyone in the district. We usually try and give everyone we shoot for 45 days to pay the assessment without any interest. The assessment is based on the actual cost incurred. It's not based on the estimate. Just because said we were going to charge you $400, but we only spent $300, we're going to only charge you $300. So it's not
Actual cost.
It's actual cost incurred. So once that assessment goes out, again, you have time to come in and pay it at the treasurer's office. If you don't pay it by the time the tax bills go out, it goes out on your tax bill. It's currently being proposed to be spread out over 5 years, and we usually estimate a 3% interest rate. Just going on averages, it looks like the average for the district for a cost on the low side is $388.42 for a total cost, or on the high side $466.81 for the average. That's depending on whether we get that public-private, as the supervisor had spoke. And if that gets spread out over an annual basis, assuming that 3% interest rate would be an $83.75 payment every year, or on that high side, $100.66. That's including that 3% interest rate. When that payment is, you can pay a portion up front. If you say, I have $100 to pay right now, I'll put that on it, and then put the rest on my taxes, that's fine. You only pay interest on what's remaining. If you let it go on your taxes, and then you say, you get a bonus at work, or you win the lottery or something, and you want to pay that debt off, you can always come in, and it's only interest due to that point in time, so.
And then just a couple other points. You made mention of the ability, Mr. Huth, you might be able to share the ability to protest. So prior to this, the process of a special assessment, in this case, we as the board have declared there is a necessity there. This isn't something that wasn't there before. There's a need. We've tried to prove that. I know some questions may be related to that. So we have various ways that we could pay for it, and I imagine that's going to be a part of the questions. Once we move forward with a special assessment, there is a process where residents can delay the special assessment, and that's through a petition process. And if I remember correctly, it's 20%. right?
I think so.
And it's 20% based on the 893 acres. So if you said, I'm against this and I want to circulate petitions to prevent us proceeding forward, then what would happen is if I signed it and I had a quarter acre and you had a half acre, you would count twice as much as me. So you'd be looking for 20% of 893 acres, let's just say, whatever that is, to prevent that. If that were the case, then the board kind of stops the process. We have to then have 50% of the people sign something saying it's necessary. But let's just move forward and say, well, let's say everybody said, well, I'm against it and I don't want to pay it. There really isn't another source that we have to pay for that, but that may be a part of some of the questions and some of the further discussion. But
Well, I
you
would
mentioned,
disagree with that.
hang on, but you had mentioned that there's the ability to reserve your right to protest. Maybe Mr. Huth, you might be able to, are you familiar, could you speak a little bit to that?
Well, there's a procedure to, if you want to make a claim later that protest with respect to your property is not being assessed because you're not receiving a benefit for this improvement. The state law provides an opportunity, if you've objected to this now, to make a claim later, to have determined whether or not you're actually benefiting from the property. Your property's benefiting from the special assessment district. If you saw what Mr. Newmer put up there, if you believe that your house was not actually in this drainage district, that might be a reason to say, you know what, this is unfair to me, I'm paying for something that doesn't improve my property. You should state that now, preserve your rights later.
So I have a question, if somebody wanted to go do petitions, when do they have to do that? What's the date on that?
I'll look it up, I'm not prepared to answer that now.
Yeah, but I guess the reason why I wanted clarification is, let's just say this process moves forward, and your property is in the middle of this drainage district as defined by Public Works. That right to protest, as Mr. Witt identified, is, in other words, that may not be, if someone truly says, well, this is wrong and a majority of folks don't want it, that probably isn't the mechanism that's gonna get them to a level of success. If this project moves forward and you're in the district, it's difficult to prove, if you're in a drainage district, that you don't benefit from the work.
It would be a tough road to go, I agree with you.
Right, but if truly the general public said, well, we're against this on its whole, the petition process, I think, is more typically the one. And in the event that there were folks that said, well, this is the process I want to take and I want to move forward, that's a process that's run through the clerk's office. You come in and the clerk's office helps with the specifics of what it has to say, what information you have to collect, what the circulation process is, and so forth. So I don't know that that's an issue we have to solve today, but obviously it can't begin today. We haven't even acted, so you can't protest something that hasn't happened yet. But presumably, as we move forward, if you didn't like the special assessment, if we take action, then you could begin a petition process. So if there's no other comments, we can open the public hearing.
Make a
I
motion
do
to
have-
open. Oh,
I do
sorry.
have a comment.
Okay.
The comment that we don't have any other funding source, that's not true. We do have a funding source. We do receive revenue, state revenue sharing, we receive cable franchise fees. Our salaries get paid. So I know that the next discussion is that we don't receive any tax dollars, but we do have money in the general fund to pay for this project. I think that we should be paying for this project out of that general fund, and we should not be doing this SAD on these people.
Okay.
I'm in this district, and I don't know if you're gonna want me to stand at that podium later or not, but we do have the funding. Are we planning on doing bonds for this project? Because if not, what's gonna happen is we're gonna take money from the general fund and basically lend it out to the SAD. We're gonna pay for the project and then get our money back. So there is money available, especially $415,000. That's not a lot of money out of the general fund to pay for this project. So that is all I have to say.
Mr. Verkest, I do have a question for our attorney. I'm not sure he's prepared to answer it at this moment, but, Mr. Huth, my understanding is the public entities, which is the Department of Roads, The township and L'Anse Creuse Public Schools constitute approximately 20% of this project, but all three bodies are exempt. It seems to me, in the fairness doctrine, that if they're exempt, then that acreage should be subtracted from the total amount of acreage these people would have to get to add up to 20%. Have I stated that correctly so you understand it?
You have stated it. It's really not a legal question as much as it is a policy question by the board. If you took property out, you'd have to find a way to supplement payment for that property that's coming out. If the schools are not gonna participate, then it's gonna likely have to come from the general fund here.
Well, at a prior meeting, you did tell us that all those entities were exempt. They don't have to pay.
Mr. I'm sorry, I don't
Did I
mean to step on your
misunderstand?
toes, but Mr. Servil, the answer to your question is, the percentage is based on the percentage that we're assessing it against. So if the area is 900 with those in, and it's 700 with them out, the percentage that you need to get to is out of 700, not
That's the question.
900. Right.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Because otherwise, they're unrepresented either for or against, they don't have a say.
That was my point.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
That makes sense.
I know we want to get to the public comments, and I think we should. I do have some things I'd like to say about the source of funding, but I'll wait until later.
And I
just
thought,
as a
that
matter
was
of
my
courtesy.
point, is I think
Yep.
there's, typically, we enter into a process of deliberation, and we don't do that until we
Right.
take public comment.
Right,
And
let's do
there's a
that.
lot of things we don't know, or questions that haven't been answered, so it's hard to begin that process, so.
I'll make a motion to open the public hearing number 1 for the Beechwood Storm Sewer Pump Station and Tributary Storm Drain System Special Assessment District at 8:00 PM.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Tominello to open the public hearing. We open up the floor for public comment before we take a motion. This motion is to open the floor for public comment, so I'll call for public comment, but there's really no reason at this point to comment. We're opening up the floor. This is just a motion for that, so. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Tominello?
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Servil?
Yes.
Mr. Batkins?
Yes.
Mr. York?
Yes.
Mr. Verkowski?
Yes. So we ask that you try to limit we'll have a timer, try to limit the comments or questions to 3 minutes. We'll try to not waste your time. We'll try to listen to them, take notes, answer them once you're done, and direct the comments to the chair. So if there's a question for an engineer, ask me, and I'll ask that question.
Should this be plugged in?
Well, there's two mics there. The one doesn't work, so.
Can you hear me with this?
Is the switch turned on it?
Wally can hear you in the,
Can you hear me?
Can you hear it, Wally? Could you turn up the PA? No, you,
Well, we do want you to use it, so folks that
So
are
we
at
know
home
your
might be
address.
watching, yeah.
and so we have it for the
Oh.
record,
Yep.
for the recording.
Well, I don't think it's working. Is there another switch on this? It is working? It's just tired.
Yeah.
Won't stay up. My name is Linda Arndt, and I live at 38245 Pine Ridge. And I'm absolutely thrilled that this flooding issue is being addressed. It sounds to me like you've done your homework and you've searched for money wherever you could find it. I know that people don't like to have extra money coming out of their pockets, and if they think they don't have a ditch around them, that it doesn't apply, but all this water's coming from somewhere and it's ending up in our backyards. The ditch behind me, I've lived here for 50 years next year. Used to be a ditch. It's about this deep now. So the water does not, it comes, it has no place to go, and it's in all of our yards around us. I presented pictures before the meeting began. Anyone's welcome to look at them. You can see how our yards and houses and garages have been flooded. And this is a community. It's just like when you support your schools, what's best for the community. Property is not going to be worth anything if they think that Harrison Township cannot take care of their drainage issues. I know we need a new pump. It used to be years back, we'd say, when the things started getting real high and coming over the banks, we'd say, time to call and make sure those pumps are turned on, because sometimes on the weekends they hadn't been turned on. So I know that that has to affect the flooding in our area. It's times that you cannot get across the road because the ditches have not been maintained. That is not necessarily this board's problem, but it has been this community's problem. If you don't live on the ditch, you may not realize it, but eventually that water's got to go somewhere. And we have to make sure our ditches are kept clean, clear, and the water is moving. I think part of our problem over the last 50 years is we have had builders come in, make special assessments, send their water where they want to, and their people are perfectly happy. They haven't had flooded apartments. But meantime, the water's been backed up, and it can't get out. And that's where we are. We are in probably the older section of Harrison Township. We have septic tanks where we are. Our septic fields are supposed to be draining into this area, and it floods in. Well, when that happens, you gotta be careful how much water you're using in your home. So I am absolutely thrilled. I will pay my assessment. I think it's worth it. And I've had worse assessments. In fact, when this came, I thought it would be worse than it is. And I think that'll be fine for us. Now, if there is money available to help us with this, and from the presentation, I think I have heard that you hunted for money wherever you could find it. I know that government, the way it is hard to get money out of sources. If we have to cough it up to make our community correctly drained, I think it's time to do it. And stop fighting over, I'll tell you, these days, kids spend that much on a pair of tennis shoes. So, like I said, I thought it would come in as a lot higher price than it did. And the fact that I can pay it over 5 years is not gonna mean anything. My dogs will not starve. I will not starve. I will have gas in my car. I will get to work if I need to get to work. And I'm absolutely thrilled with the job you guys have done. That's my speech.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Batanzi. I live at 39157 Memory Lane. I am reserving my right to appeal because I disagree with this.
Amen.
I start by the first letter that said it was tentative, and it is not. I received this, which shows the affected area. This is from the township. But Department of Public Works shows it as the 3 separate drains. Beyond that, the map from Department of Public Works basically shows that all of the new construction is affected, not the old neighborhoods. I have more water than ever, and I'm pretty sure everybody else does. Now that we have the North Point construction, we have even more because that is built up quite a bit above Memory Lane. And if you're gonna talk about costs, I would question Body Construction as to, first of all, why it's gonna cost them $55,000 to take down that pedestrian bridge. The other highest bid was 22. They're also removing and salvaging the split rail of 200 feet for a cost of $400, but replacing 96 feet at a cost of more than $2,000. I just don't agree at all. And again, Department of Public Works has helped me make my decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I can at least answer the question regarding the bid process. Within the public sector, certainly, and not exclusive, but pretty typical, we'll have what we call unit price bidding. So we give a list of a scope of work. The bid document was a book about that thick. And in there, we describe and request a scope of various, things to be done, spelled out specifically in units. And in the end, the low bidder is the person whose total price is the lowest. So at 708, I think the next highest bidder was 724,000, and they went up from there. Unfortunately, we do see a great deal of variation in unit pricing. So for example, the resident pointed out that let's just say that we ask for cubic yards of gravel at a particular area. So we say, well, after you put this in, you need to backfill with gravel, and we estimate 120 yards of gravel, let's just say. We have a price per unit of gravel, so that in the event that it turns out to be 130 or only 110, we're not squabbling over what the price is per unit. So before we award the bid, we have an amount for every unit. In there, some of those units are lump sum prices. In fact, what usually makes us nervous is when a bidder lowballs a lump sum. So let me give you an example. We asked for one lump sum, remove the bridge. That's just one unit. You can't say, well, we accidentally found a second bridge you have to remove. When someone puts a price of $500 there, let's just use as an example, what that really means is they inflated all their unit prices for gravel and for asphalt and for all these other things that they might miscalculate on. So when we see a large sum for something like removal of the bridge, what it usually means is they've put some other fixed costs in there and just put it into one lump sum. But that's usually good for us because it means that the rest of those numbers, if they were the low bidder, were actually below the rest of the bid. So I know it is an odd number and it's wildly outside of anyone else's, but just the removal of the bridge clearly is not 55,000. We could see that from the others, but in the end, that probably benefits us, so.
My name is George Felgenauer. I live at 38129 Pine Ridge. I fully support this project in every respect. Harrison Township and the community as a whole have generally been very short-sighted in many of their projects as far as improvements, and I think people look too much at their personal situations rather than the township as a whole. Anything we can do to improve the property values, I think, is a positive. I do think that it's still a little bit short-sighted. I'm not quite clear as to what was happening. So I live right over here. I can see the township office on my back door. If somebody spits, the street floods, it's collapsing. It's constantly overflowing. It's just full of muck and stuff. Is there some attempt being made to physically clean out the bottom of that ditch, not just remove the wood debris, but to clean out that ditch so that it's, as Linda said, it's deepened and will allow water to flow? Again, I fully support it.
Okay, thank you. I can answer that. If we talk about the scope of all the drains in the township, it would be too broad a brush to say that they're all in the same state, but it's certainly fair to say that a majority of the drains, such as Savan and Vanter de Buff, have been largely neglected. And there's a variety of reasons for that. The short answer is that the scope of this work, that $65,000, is a fraction of what it would take to clean out all the drains just in this district. And you have to remember that there are other drains outside of this district where someone might say, well, my water doesn't flow through that pump station, but I'm angry because my street doesn't drain as quickly as necessary. This is the beginning of a process, which from my perspective anyways, or from my opinion, was not likely to be very successful prior to a change in the leadership at the Public Works office. The work that you've seen done has 100% been Public Works people. In some cases, we've contributed some for some contractors, but the majority of that work has been done by Public Works work crews. I didn't see him here for 8 years or 9 years, and before that I was paying attention because I also live on one of these drains. So this isn't going to fix that, but this is the beginning of that process. I can't demuck drains if I don't have a pump. It's a kind of a process. If I don't have a pump station and a detention pond for that water to flow to, demucking the drains doesn't do us any good. So we got to start kind of at the head and work out through those arteries. But I, as one board member, don't intend to make this the end of the clean out of the drains. But we're gonna have to chip away at it a little at a time because it is a huge, huge cost. And in that process, continue to look for any other sources of funding that we can get. Sir?
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Paul Thone, Thoen. I live at 38701 Town Hall and I'm objecting to this assessment. First of all, we were notified of this, and then 1 week later, we got a postcard that's saying, oh, we underestimated the cost. And, I mean, how can we get people involved in this if you send out false information? Second of all, nobody told us that if 20% of the people in the assessment district doesn't want this assessment, then we can do a petition, but it has to be done prior to this meeting. So 20% of the so how do we know that 20%, if we got 20% of the people that don't want it in the district, we can actually have a public, a public election. So that wasn't told to us, and I think that's wrong. The other thing is that Ward Trim, the letter dated March 9th, 2017, indicated that the Macomb County Road Commission initially wanted to do this, and then all of a sudden they're gone. What about the Drain Commission? How come they're not involved in this? I mean, these are drains. I mean, the drains that we're talking about are the jurisdiction of the Macomb County Drain Commission. They should be paying for that. And not only that, is if they don't pay it, then Harrison Township should pay it, because when they had a problem with on Lakeshore at the end of South River Road, who paid for that? Harrison Township. So we're paying for things that we already have paid for, or the water, the water department. We pay a lot for our water. So why isn't the water department doing this? Because this is part of the water. Next item is that you indicated that the SAW funds end on May 7th. Why didn't we have a meeting much before that? This is the 24th. How come we didn't have a meeting prior to today to talk about this? Because this is an important thing. We need to be able to look at it and go forward with that. Now, I know that I'm limited to
That's all right.
3 minutes. But the other thing is that I looked at the bidding, and there's a contingency for nothing by the contractor for $70,000. They said, well, if we can't pay, if we run into something that costs more, we get another $70,000. Well, what if it's less? Do we get paid back? How do we get credited for that? I mean, so I know that you do a very good job, and $700,000 for a project like this isn't a huge amount. But the answer to it is that you're stewards of our money, and by being a steward of our money, if it costs, we should have a final solid bid, no contingencies, no anything. And if they cost more, we should have another meeting about this. If it costs less, we should get a credit. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. So, apologies. The original notice as it went out, we believed was unclear, and we believe that in fact it suggested that the amount you were being charged, the amount listed was an annual amount for 5 years. So we thought, right, so the postcard, the secondary postcard was to clarify that, to say, no, that's the total amount, and it can be divided for 5 years, if I may.
You should have probably done the whole
Sir,
thing over
sir,
again.
in an interest
I
of,
think it's wrong.
right, I understand, in an interest of, if we wanna answer the questions, I can't engage in debate, or we're just gonna take public comment and then close the meeting when we're done, and so, second thing is you'd ask the question, why can't the Drain Commission do that work? They can, but they don't have a source of funding, so other communities, our peer communities, have drain funds, and on an annual basis, they earmark dollars or send dollars to the drain commission, and the drain commissioner divides those up, and those funds build up, and when the work is needed to be done, they spend the money. So that is not a process we follow, and we're not the only community that doesn't follow that. But there are communities that have, within their budget, an annual amount given to the drain commissioner, and they divide that up and put that into drain funds. But without that, they don't have a source of revenue. Sir, I'm not going to engage in debate. You had a chance to speak. I'm sorry.
I understand.
You mentioned Lake Shore as an example. Recently, 3 of the bridges in that Huron Point subdivision needed to be replaced. We contributed a small amount, a small portion of that. However, we also there did a special assessment to pay for those bridges, because I don't think it would be fair that you or I, living in this area, in the center of the township, should pay for bridges any more than they should have to pay for drains, because the folks, a lot of the area, I'm not gonna engage, I'm sorry, you can have a seat, but I'm not gonna recognize you. The point is that for other funding areas, we have done special assessments, and we just did one within the last year for those 3 bridges, and it was about twice as much as this. The water department cannot pay for this kind of work. The state of Michigan is very clear about water and sewer services. The water and sewer department is what's called by the state an enterprise fund. We can't charge for things on the water bill that go out. So in other words, the water department can't perform work other than delivering water services and sewer services and charge that. Now, I can have a water and sewer worker for on a particular day if we don't have a water main break or something like that. Maybe they go do a repair to a patch of asphalt on the bike path. But for that day, they have to charge their time to the general fund. The water and the amount that we all pay in our water bills can't be used for anything other than water. Why no meeting before? The first meeting we had on this was January 21st, 2014. We've in a public setting, we've applied for the grant, we've discussed the scope of work, we had a workshop where the engineer and public works director described an annual amount of $40,000 to $50,000 in repairs, fuel, and overtime just to keep the patchwork system of pumps operating. But you mentioned a concern about the ability to protest or get the 20%. That hasn't started yet. There's nothing to protest yet. This public meeting is to inform residents, but primarily allow residents to give us feedback. But you couldn't protest something yet because we haven't actually taken action. This public hearing precedes that action.
That's not true.
Well,
That's not what the statute says, but
Okay.
I'm not gonna go anymore.
and the $70,000 contingency, that's not a sum of money that we're approving. That's rather a sum of money that we're adding on top so that when we take the final bill and notify all the residents, we don't want to assume it's going to come in at 700,000, have it go over and say, well, we made a mistake, we need more than what we told you. On the contrary, we add a 10% contingency in for unforeseens. But as I mentioned, it is a unit bid project, so the actual units, whatever it is, if there's a pump, there's a price for that pump, that's what it is. If we said we need 80 cubic yards of cement for this driveway, or the driveway needs to be this thick and by this dimensions, that's what it is. If we want cyclone fence, if we add cyclone fence, we know the price. If we remove it, we reduce the price.
I'm very familiar with those special contracts, but it should be a solid bid.
Yeah, it is though. The answer to your question is if it comes in less, we do pay less, sir.
Mr. Verkest, just clarification, if there is an add charge to this contract, it comes before this board, correct?
With that's dependent on what this board does. Frequently, we'll approve a certain amount of contingency subject to, the public works, whoever's overseeing the project.
That's the way this contract was approved. was
If
with
I
the
may,
10%
how it normally works, Mr. Serviel, is that if the contingency is approved and we have overtures and we get estimates from the contractor, as long as we stay within that 10% contingency, I do not bring it forward to the board. If I get to a problem where there have been major oversights or something completely missed or something completely changed where it's gonna go over that, I bring it to the 3 full-time officials for either emergency approval, and then it's brought to the board, or if there's time permitting, I do an agenda item and bring it to you.
And we even get notification in the office over contingency issues. It's just the board approves that so that every time a small change occurs, won't wait 2 weeks for the board meeting.
But the resident did ask if it, or mentioned if it was less. If this project comes in less, the assessment will be less.
Correct. We only pay for the actual work performed, not a flat lump sum regardless.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a pet peeve of mine, and I said this over 12 years now, that it's funny how we're gonna sit here and say that, oh, it's contingency that we don't use it. I can remember one project that all of the contingency wasn't used. And every project, it's the number plus the contingency. So we're not gonna get a refund on that. Don't think that we're gonna get anything other than 10% contingency on this project.
We actually just finished our last road paving
That's what I
project.
just said. I remember one.
Yeah, we have one, and, I mean, that's the one I oversaw.
That's the one.
So we actually came in under because we used less units, because we were out in the field spending the time to make sure the work was done right.
Yeah, let's
Bob
limit board.
Warnock, 27460 Coleridge. I'm on the southeast corner of Hazel and Coleridge. I live this drain every day. And I think it's a great thing you're doing, improving the pumping station. However, I don't think we should burden the cost of it. That cost should be burdened by Armstrong and Gilbert, who developed the woods of Glenmark. They rerouted the Savant Drain when they were developing that property, and I have to challenge you on the date you said that the Savant Drain pump was decommissioned. It wasn't in the 80s, it was in the late 90s when they were developing that woods of Glenmark. And for $100,000, for them to pay $100,000 for this, and we're gonna pay $1 million, I think it's wrong. So I want to protest this, and I'm not happy about paying these taxes.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Denise Walters, and I live on L'Anse Cruz in Harrison Creek condos. Several years ago, I live on the Van Buren Drain also, and several years ago, we had to revamp our drain system, and the township nor the county would help us. We had to pay for it ourselves. It was $450,000, and we have 93 units that are on the property. And the township, the county, nobody helped us. We didn't get any help on our permits or anything. And I think it's unfair that I'll have to pay along with my other people that we have on our property. And you want to charge us when the county has told me we don't own any of our property from our deck out. It's an easement and the county owns it. And the county said they would be responsible for all our fix-ups at our condos, and they were not. And we had to pay for all of it, and I don't think that's fair to us either. And you want to charge us for .25 acreage, which we don't own any of that. And that's what the county and the township says. So I don't think that's fair to us that we have to pay this either, when we own nothing, they say. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, I think within that condo association, the individual charge is .08 acres, which will probably be a cost of somewhere to $70 to $80. So it isn't a quarter acre that I recognize your objection, but I was just, as a point of clarification, those condos divided out to be .08 acres per resident. So it's $70 to $80 charge.
Well, we've already paid our $450,000.
Understood, I understand, I know, I believe, and I agree, I understand your concern.
Jake Jamison, 38640 Hazel Street. So, I think I might speak for the whole group about this. Well, the majority of the group. None of us want to pay for this project. It's not our problem. We pay our taxes, don't we? Do we all pay our taxes? Okay.
Do not put words in my mouth.
Okay, well, I disagree with this project. You guys do have a problem, that's for sure. And it needs to be addressed.
We have a problem.
But it is not our responsibility to pay for their mess.
It's your turn, go ahead.
So, it's not our responsibility to pay for it. I disagree with it. And is my student loan debt your problem? No, it's not. So, the drainage problem in Harrison Township is not my problem, and I don't wanna pay for it.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jeffrey Pate. I live at 39310 Memory Lane. I live right along the Petit Conlet Drain, or the Pettit Conlet Drain. You mentioned in one of the things in the history was these dams were put in during, like the Pettit Conlet Drain was dammed off at South River Road in the early 70s due to rising lake levels, and we were having lake level issues. Why the Pettit Conlet Drain was routed the way it was, rather than just a permanent pump put in there where the temporary pump was and dumping out into the Clinton River, that's neither here nor there. What I wasn't familiar with was a siesta drain. Now, from what I've listened to your presentation, what is discharged from the Beechwood drain goes on now and is pumped out with the siesta drain, correct?
Yes, gravity feeds to that point, but those were put in as advanced measure storm. The water has to be extremely high for that pump to run, and the dam's in place. We have not had to do that. That was put in as an advanced measure through the Corps of Engineer for flood prevention.
Oh,
So
okay.
those pumps, it actually gravity feeds. Beechwood pumps it across 16, it gravity feeds to the siesta drain, out the canal by Jimmy's Boat Library, out to the lake. If the water levels rise, we put the dams in, then the pump station takes it around the dam and out to the lake, so it cannot come back.
Well, I'm just wondering why we would be going from one pump to the next.
It's
If the pumps at the siesta drain are capable of pumping 40 cubic feet per second, why the Beechwood pump and dam isn't removed completely and let the siesta drain take the load?
If it were strictly as you presumed when you thought you heard the presentation, that both pumps were running simultaneously, that may be the case, but as I said, it pumps across 16 Mile and gravity feeds through the marsh to
Correct.
the siesta, gravity feeds to the
And
lake.
cleaning out part of that marsh is part of the bid, is it not? Opening up that drain on the,
On the marsh side?
Yeah.
In the mouth of it is, and yes, Public Works has addressed the concern of opening that up.
if that is being opened up, then the Beechwood pump station, I see no longer is a need for it.
Well, maybe I might be able to answer that. If there was no detention pond there, that might be, I guess that might be a better argument. The issue is if we take, and I apologize, we'll recognize your time,
Right.
but if we take this entire district, Harrison Township is so relatively flat that we don't
Yeah.
have the pitch, so that water has a finite distance it's gonna flow before it's basically stagnant. So as it is, there's only a foot of fall from Beechwood to the siesta point. So the idea is to have detention where that pump station is to allow a certain amount of water to flow to that point. If we have a large wet event, it will flow as you described. But once it reaches it no longer crests the weir, then we pump that pond down so that the next wet event allows that water to run in and it doesn't stagnate, which leads to
Lines and, or, yeah.
leads to
Now
the,
virus.
yeah, well, and it also leads to the drains filling in, it leads to, standing water, a lot of other issues. But if we knew that thing ran and flowed properly and we, then that would be true. But once you go to a system of detention to get it to flow, then you have to lift it to empty that pond.
Yeah, I'm familiar with pumps and pump. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name's Keith Beals, 37891 Lance Cruz, Harrison Township. Mr. Verkes, I had a meeting with you months ago. I had found there was a grant available to Harrison Township for the last 50 years. You and I had a discussion. You said you didn't want to accept that grant because they wanted you to purchase the pump station we're discussing now. Is that true or not true?
No, sir, that's not true.
So it's a different pump station?
Yep. I can explain that and I'll give you
No, no,
time.
that's fine, okay, so it's a different pump station. But I went back to them on the grant, and now that the new elected officials are in, they say they gave me the information, the grant was no longer available. But you did recognize and told me that the grant was available. So the new politicians are saying it wasn't available. I feel we shouldn't have to pay for this. I reject paying for it. Two, I think when you do your calculations with condominiums and larger Krogers and all that, their impervious surface, they should pay the most. As the schools, all the other constructed buildings and industries in our township. And we accept all the water from all the other cities and all the other counties. We should be going, I'm asking you, Mr. Rakesh, you should be going to them and to the state and get the money to correct the problem, because if they keep pushing water here, it's not gonna go away. And when their water comes here, it raises our lake level before it ends, and it pushes the water back to us. So, other than that, call Trump, he'll get a better deal.
My name is Gary Bright. I'm at 38370 Town Hall, about a block away. And the family's been here since 1938. We have an acre of land, and I call it the ditch, we'll call it the drain, runs right through and cuts off a quarter acre. It's landlocked. It's been that way since the 40s, and we're paying taxes on it. In 1950 or thereabouts, the ditch was cleared by the county, and that's when Tom Welsh became the Public Works Commissioner. It's the county's easement. It's not Harrison Township's easement, it's the county's easement. Now, what changed to give you the authority to do what you're doing? I'm for the project, don't get me wrong, but to pay for it through an assessment, I'm totally against it. We have trees that have grown in a right-of-way that are 50 feet tall, and I can't get my arms around them. And there's several of them that are leaning towards the neighbor's house. It's dangerous. I caught a couple of kids. There was a big tree was on this kind of an angle, and a couple of kids were playing on it, and I had to tell them, you know, to go home. That is a danger, and this was cleared out in 1951. They had bulldozers. They cleaned the drain out. It was the county. What has changed in terms of liability to maintain the easement? Tell me, please. It's the county's problem, not these people. They pay their county taxes. 12 years ago, I went to the township and, you know, talked to them about these trees and can the township do anything about it? And they said, no, it's the county's problem. Now we're here tonight. I'm confused. Totally confused.
So I, excuse me, I can address a couple of those things. Both the prior resident and yourself, Mr. Bright,